Just go ahead.
Call the meeting to order. Stand for the pledge of allegiance.
We need to put a stop. Next time. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one person from the newspaper, Linda Tincture.
Right there.
I'll pronounce that correctly. Posted mail. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Open the floor for nominations for President, Board of Finance. Anyone?
I vote that we keep the same president for the Board of Finance.
I would second that.
Okay, is there any discussion on that? All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Board of Finance, and we need to elect a vice president. Board's open for nomination for vice president.
I nominate Scott Wursler for Vice President.
Second that. Any discussion? All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And nomination for Board of Finance Secretary.
I'd nominate Lynn.
Second to that.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Lynn, is you going to present the investment policy?
Yeah, I'm just going to make this pretty quick here. We currently use what's known under policy 6144 to maximize our return to the corporation of our cash balance, consistent with the salary and monies, the safety, and the desired liquidity. All of our current money we're investing through a high yield sweep account, or a STAR account. That's where the majority of our money comes through. The expenses and the revenues that we receive daily gets swept into the actual interest earning high yield. It's a STAR account or two accounts. It gets swept over each night. So we could have expenditures, or we get revenues, positive or negative, that gets swept over into our investment, and we get all the interest we could possibly earn on that. I did check with STAR, and they said that the only thing that they had comparable to the sweep account for interest, currently our interest rate is 0.20% or 0.20%. If we look into CDs, their 3-month CD rate is 0.05%. So, and if I go out to 18 months, that's when I could actually get the same return, 0.20%. So there really wasn't a whole lot of other options out there. And for the liquidity and the ease of using it, that's why I guess I would recommend we continue to use the sweep account at this point. If interest rates would go up, then it might be more beneficial to look at other options at that point. Any questions on the investments?
I do have a question on that. If
Yeah.
if interest rates were to go up, say 6 months from now, can we in the middle of the year just switch over?
Yeah. Okay. And we can use whatever the board would approve as far as how long you want to go with those investments, like 6 months or whatever.
Okay.
Included with your packet was school corporation fiscal indicators. This is a annual thing done by this organization called the Distress Unit Appeals Board. They review all schools throughout the district. There's a link in the middle of that page. You can actually go on there yourself if you want to look at it at any time. It's going to basically, you'll pull your own school corporation up, and it gives basically if there's any financial concerns with that school district. If we were a distressed type of corporation, but aren't, this would be the indicators that would tell the state that they need to look into the corporation. I can just kind of go through the highlights of those. I tried to print it off so it could actually read a little better, but they didn't have the site up and running to print out like a nice printable version of it. But the first section is your average daily membership, and we've kind of been talking about this, that our ADM has been declining over the last 8 to 9 years. This only goes to the 2021 school year, and in that school year we actually dropped 51 students from the previous year. My hope is that with this next school year that we're currently in, we only dropped 9.75 to start the school year off with. So I'm hoping that as we're trending down, we're actually starting to level off. At least the amount of decrease in ADM is not going down as much per year, and hopefully then we'll start seeing a rise in our ADM. The fund balances is the next section it talks about, and this is really divided into 2 sections because up until 2018, the state only had a general fund. They didn't have the current education fund and operation fund. You'll see in there the dark blue in 2018. That dark blue is what's tracking as the old general fund for the school. In 2019, they took the general fund and they put all educational expenses like teachers, the teacher aides, anything in the classroom as expenses for education became the education fund. And then they took everything out of the general fund that was associated with capital projects, transportation, custodials, office supplies or office staff, and that became the operation fund. And you can look at 2019 and 20, the aqua color and the gray color there. You can see that from 19 to 20 that the education fund actually, fund balance increased, and that the operation fund pretty much stayed stable. When I looked at it for 2021, we just finished it up, the education fund actually it's just slightly down by about $80,000 to $100,000, and that encompasses all of the pay increases we did, back pay. So we're still maintaining in that fund, and then the operation fund remained the same and actually went up a few at $20,000.
What caused the deficit on the local?
What caused the deficit? Like the negative, in this case would be the local funds. So what it's saying is that our local funds went down. You'll probably see back in the past when we were getting more local grants and so forth, like mainly the Woods grant, that would be a higher increase, has been going down the previous year. So this is a net change in how the fund balances are going up or down. And it's not just looking at the education in general fund, it's looking at all your funds. So if we're spending more of the grant money in one year versus another, it's going to cause the overall fund balance to go down in local funds. The next page you'll come to is the annual deficit and surplus. And this is for all funds. It's not for all our grant funds, our local funds, education fund, rainy day fund, operation fund. And you'll see that back in 2015, we had a lot more expenditures than we did revenues. Since that time, we've been able to maintain to keep our expenditures equal to or a little bit less than our revenue per year. That adds to our operation balance, that builds up our operation balances in all of our funds. But just keep in mind, this isn't just the education fund or the operation fund. This is all our grant funds, all Title I funds, everything from the state, all included into one. So the last 4 or 5 years, whatever we've been bringing in revenue, we've been expending roughly the same amount. And then that translates down to the model below, which talks about the fund balance as a percent of your expenditures. And it says up above, this is the education fund, the general fund, and the rainy day fund. So as you can see, the last from 2013 up to the last couple of years, we used to only have about 15 to 25% of operating balance to our total expenditures. You want to have as much operating balance as possible in case revenues would be shortened or your expenditures go up unexpectedly. So back in 2013 and 15, we were tracking around 15 to 25%. Now we're at least 50% of our expenditures. So our operating balances have grown. Our funds are a lot better health-wise for that. The last page talks about all funds for revenues by type. And this is a cumulative graph that they've produced. I can just kind of go through the different legends there. Basically, from 2015 on, we've kind of maintained in all of our revenue sources. They haven't gone down. The width of the line kind of tells you how much portion that is. Like with the federal funds, you can see that they've carried over in the brown pretty much the same amount for the whole time period. And the state revenue actually narrowed a little bit back in 2014 and 15. But since 15, it's been a pretty constant amount coming from state revenues to our various funds. You'll see that the pink section there is probably the biggest part that caused the whole graph to fluctuate. That's other local revenues. That includes our grant money. And during that time, we got quite a bit of money from 80/20 Woods Foundation, and that shows the increase there of local revenue coming in during that period of time. And then after that faded away, or phased out, that revenue flow has been pretty much the same. The debt revenue, 2013, we issued lease rentals at Pearston and South Whitley Elementary, and that's what shows the revenue from those bonds, from the lease rental, came in 2013, and that's why that's a wider amount right there. And then the last time we issued bonds until this last year was in 2018, and that shows a little bit of the increase for those GEO bonds we issued as the revenue coming from those bonds that we sold. And then the local tax revenue is just a constant figure. It's pretty much remained the same throughout the series. The last graph doesn't really apply to us because that's for schools that do referendums. We haven't ever done a referendum in the last, or during this period at all, so that doesn't pertain to us. Any questions on those?
Question, let's go back to the annual deficit surplus.
Yeah.
Look at that in 2020.
Yes.
Deficit surplus, that's something we need to be concerned about. 16, 17, 18, 19.
Yeah. I think you would if it was just the education and operation fund, but that's all funds. It's grant money and everything. You could be getting money in one year and spending it in another year on local donations and funds and Title I and so forth.
Is there some big reason why it shows up there, it doesn't show up in the 4 previous years?
Yeah, it's just that we had higher expenditures in 2020, not per se to the main education operation fund, but all of our funds. So like if we were spending money out of a grant that we got or a Title I more that year, some title grants are 2-year grants, so that can always fluctuate too quite a bit. You could have more expenditures in one year versus the other. But if you look at the one right below it, that's what I'm always kind of monitoring. It's just only looking at the general fund and the operation fund. And that's kind of what I look at every year is to make sure that those two funds are operating balances maintaining or increasing. I don't want those to have a deficit. That's going to be an issue. Because there's only two sources. Education is state money and operation is tax rate. They're the most we get both of those.
Sitting where we're sitting, we see a deficit there, kind of.
Deficit in which one?
I said, if you see a deficit, that makes you
Yes.
question whether the
Yeah. And like I said, it's not with the education or the operation fund or the debt service fund. It's just how we spend our grant money during those years. We spent more, we received more than previous year.
Can we get a printout of that sometime so we can see?
Yeah, I can go back and look and see exactly what it is. Fund by fund even if you
That
want.
might be helpful, at least we can understand. Thank you.
I have two quick questions. And maybe you can't answer, but you could get back with us. On the 2014, that pink area is really big compared to everything else after. Can you go back and tell us, you might not be able to right now, but could you tell us what other local revenue did we have that was so much that
Right.
year? And maybe we could build on that for
Yeah,
the
I'll
future.
look into that more, but it is all funds. So if we have big grant money coming in, that could cause that.
I'm
Because
just
that's
curious
actually other
about
local
2014. And
revenue.
then
And I think a lot of the woods money came in that year.
in 14,
Yes, 2014.
is that right? It wasn't that much later?
We started getting lump sum distribution in 2014. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I'm curious, what is that 2014, that pink is so high?
Yeah,
That would be great to.
it's a good idea.
And then in 2021, since that's not on here yet, will we be showing a surplus or deficit for next year for the numbers that we have?
By fund or by total?
Well,
I mean, I can tell you by fund, like I said, with the operations fund, we maintained our operations.
okay,
That's what's giving several increases to the non-certified staff, because they're not in the education fund. And we had a reduction in our education fund operating balance from the beginning of the year to the end. I think it was like about $100,000. But that's what going back pay and paying everything forward from October going forward, or September going forward.
okay.
But yeah, I can try to give you 2021 numbers too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I move that we adjourn this part of the
I
meeting.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. We'll call to order the reorganization